Rick Grimes is back, and I don't mean the shell of the man he once was, but the Rick Grimes that we all know and love has been brought back to the surface by his love for Michonne. And boy, man, this episode was a real tearjerker, especially if you are an OG Walking Dead fan. Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and these are all the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, Episode 4. Guys, never did I think a Roomba could hold so much symbolism, but leave it to AMC to yet again have a robot vacuum play a pivotal role in one of their series.
The hell is that?
A Roomba.
For a decade, walkers have roamed around on autopilot consuming flesh, the same way this little Roomba has been roaming around this apartment collecting dirt. But the Roomba isn't meant to represent just the walkers, it represents Rick and Michonne. We've talked a lot in previous episodes about the difference between surviving and living, and the difference between being the Walking Dead and being the ones who live. In the original series, we hear Rick give a speech about how they as a group are the Walking Dead. They are living on borrowed time.
We are the Walking Dead.
But Michonne challenged this idea multiple times throughout the original series. First with her speech about the importance of finding a home.
Instead of just making it, because right now, this is what making it looks like.
And then with her push to make Rick stand up against Negan.
Everything we have, we got from fighting.
Several times throughout the original series, we saw Rick set on autopilot, an autopilot to survive. He couldn't afford any moments of hesitation. He had to act in order to survive. And just like this little Roomba, despite the world falling apart around him, Rick pushed through and did what he had to do. The only thing he could do to keep on moving. After Rick's many years at the CRM, he has yet again fallen victim to the repetitious nature of survival. He has become a cog in a machine. Now let's talk about this X scar on Michonne. A little later in the episode, she gives Rick the TLDR on what happened, but let's do a deeper dive on why this scar is important. But before I get into that, you guys may have noticed that we are releasing these breakdowns before the episode actually airs on AMC, and that's because episodes of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live drop early on AMC Plus, and they're our sponsor for this video. AMC Plus is home to the entire Walking Dead library, so you can catch up with characters like Maggie, Negan, and Daryl Dixon. It's also home to one of my favorite shows ever, Mad Men, not to mention a huge selection of movies, BBC America, IFC Unlimited, and the horror platform Shudder, which is essential for horror fans. They even have exclusive extras like the Better Call Saul employee training series. So check out our link in the description below for a free trial of AMC Plus. Terms and conditions apply. And with AMC Plus, you can see Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live hours before anyone else, which is the best way to avoid spoilers on social media.
This is the one where they kill Adriana. It was so sad.
You just ruined it.
Anyways, back in Season 9, Episode 14, we get a flashback to the time between Rick's final episode and the 6-year time skip that followed. In these flashbacks, we see Daryl and a pregnant Michonne searching for Rick months after the explosion at the bridge. Michonne finds Rick's Colt Python on the riverbed, the same gun that would later be carried by Judith Grimes. Michonne reconnects with the woman named Jocelyn that she knew before the world fell.
Oh my God, Michonne.
The apocalypse was not kind to Jocelyn. She's lost her mind. She and her twisted group kidnapped several children from Alexandria, including Judith, and they have other child servants whose minds they've corrupted as well. Daryl and Michonne embark on a mission to find Judith, and in the process, they're captured and branded with these X's. This episode is a major piece of Michonne's story. She is forced to do something terrible in order to save Judith and her unborn child, something that no doubt left a scar. And that is why that Season 9 episode is titled Scars. Sure, she and Daryl are physically scarred by their encounter with the cult, but even more so, she is left emotionally scarred after having to put down these child soldiers. Here on this bookshelf, we can see a lot of books about computer coding, a hint at how the scientists who lived here were able to keep the place running for so long. Among these coding books is a book called Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary. Published in 1968, Ramona the Pest is the second installment of the Ramona series. It follows a rebellious young lady as she starts kindergarten, and like Michonne says, she's a lot like Judith. But you can tell by the look on Rick's face how secluded he feels from his family. When Michonne talks about Judith's rebellious and independent personality, those of us who watch the show know exactly what she's talking about. But Rick, on the other hand, hasn't seen Judith since she was just a baby. Next, we got this clip from Michonne about Rick becoming a creative writer.
You've become a bit of a creative writer these days.
Rick has always been a bit of a poet when it comes to his speeches. Maybe in another life, he would have been a great motivational speaker.
And I am a motivational speaker.
And finally, we get to see Rick learn about his son, RJ.
He's almost 8.
You need to give me the PRB.
Later in the episode, we learn that Rick has forgotten Carl's face, and we'll break that down a little bit later. But I want to bring it up because I think that Rick's emotional hesitance at finding out he has a son could be tied to the fact that he shut himself off from that part of his heart. Part of him that loves and misses his son Carl was taped off years ago as a coping and survival mechanism. So when learning that he has a son now, that walled off section of his heart rejects it. But through Michonne's persistence and love, that wall is broken down. And like I said a little later, we're going to talk about that Carl scene that had me crying like a baby.
No.
And real quick before we move on from RJ, Michonne says that he's almost 8 years old. That is insane. I mean, I guess I knew that Rick has been gone for that long, but hearing it said out loud that Rick has been gone for more than double the amount of time that transpired between the pilot and his final episode is crazy.
It's so confusing.
But this really explains why Rick and Michonne have become such strangers. They have been apart for longer than they were together. They've grown apart. They don't know each other anymore. They've had different life-altering experiences during this time they've been apart, whereas before they had a shared life experience surviving together in the apocalypse. As Rick and Michonne argue, they keep getting interrupted by this computer voice over the intercom.
Your preferred temperature will be reached
Where is that
in 1
thing?
minute.
The voice's reminder that the room's temperature is growing higher and higher was a great way to symbolize Rick and Michonne reaching their boiling points. The truth had finally reached the surface.
Your preferred temperature has been reached.
Rick's fear of challenging the CRM and his feeling trapped echoes the early days of Alexandria being under the thumb of Negan. Rick accepted defeat and felt that the only way to survive was to bend the knee to Negan. But during that time, Michonne was adamant that they fight back against Negan. Rick had retreated to his Walking Dead mentality, the idea that they needed to survive at whatever the cost.
That we are the walking dead.
But Michonne insisted that survival was only worth it when there was something worth living for. Hence, the title of this series, The Ones Who Live. And that dichotomy between the two characters was once again shown in this episode. Rick says,
I want you to live.
and Michonne realizes that she has to remind Rick once again what living really is. Michonne tells Rick how Judith and RJ call him the brave man, a reference to scenes like this from the original series.
People like the brave man are never really gone anyway. He lives inside our hearts and makes us brave too.
Even after Rick and Michonne are given an out with their helicopter crashing into the building, Rick still doesn't want to go home. Again, showing us that Rick has forgotten who he is. No longer does he prioritize his family, but he seems to have taken on this subtle savior complex. He thinks that he alone can change the CRM and create a new world.
Okafor's gone. Thorne's one of them. Now I'm the only one left.
Rick then belittles the life that he, Michonne, and the others fought so hard to build, and all the blood that they spilled.
We've been crawling around in the dirt so long, Michonne.
This line showed me that Rick's time in the CRM has made him a little big for his already tight britches. When Michonne leaves the apartment, we see her pull a kitchen knife from this block, and it reminded me of her flashback scene in Season 4, Episode 9. In that episode, we saw a distorted view of Michonne's life before the world fell, and we got this amazing show of her katana hilt sticking out of the kitchen knife block. Hey, Colton. Colton's the guy who's eternally trapped in our tiny TV, but he doesn't know, so please don't tell him. Colton, did you notice your bow staff theory might be coming true?
Yes, I did.
Bow staff theory?
Well, in our coverage of episode 2, we talked about the Book of Exodus imagery in this series. The parting of the Sea of Walkers mimicked the parting of the Red Sea by Moses on his mission to free his people from oppression. And the same is true for Michonne in her mission to free Rick. But not just Rick. We theorize that Michonne will seek to free all of those being oppressed by the tyrannical military of the CRM. In the Book of Exodus, Moses relied on faith in God and divine intervention to achieve the impossible, freeing his people and parting the sea. Michonne has also relied on a belief in the impossible in her mission to find Rick. In our coverage of episode 2, we also talked about how Michonne mentioned a bow staff.
And what was your weapon of choice out there?
Bow staff.
She lied and told the CRM that her former weapon was a bow staff, not a sword, likely in hopes of the bow staff appearing as a more peaceful weapon, mirroring Morgan's use of the bow staff in the original series. But in the Book of Exodus, it was a staff that was held in the air by Moses to part the Red Sea. So in this scene, we see Michonne break this lamp and grant herself a staff. I think we are yet again getting imagery that suggests a connection to the Book of Exodus and Michonne's mission to free the people under the thumb of the CRM, and maybe even part that same Sea of Walkers again and then close it on the CRM.
Sorry, I had you on mute. Anyways, when Michonne leaves, we see her stop in the hall waiting for Rick to come after her. And we see Rick standing at the door with his hand hovering over the doorknob. And guys, I was on the edge of my seat yelling, "Go after her!"
Go, 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 go.
Next, we learn how this apartment building has been operating all this time. It's a renewable energy green living building.
When I conceived of Greenwood, it was so clear. Like-minded innovators in various fields seeking to live off the grid.
And this might be a reach, but the name Greenwood, while it certainly might be a reference to it being a green energy building, Greenwood could also be a reference to Greenwood, Indiana. Greenwood, Indiana is home to one of the most elaborate Walking Dead Halloween displays in the country. When Michonne finds this note left behind by one of the scientists, we're yet again reminded of Rick's note before he considered taking his own life. Several times throughout the season, we've seen apology notes left behind by those who have taken their own lives, mirroring Rick's note. And while Rick didn't physically end his life, we do learn that he did end his life mentally. He secluded himself from the parts of his heart and mind that remembered and loved his family.
I can't live without you.
Rick had once again become the Walking Dead, but more on that in just a bit. Michonne says,
I don't know who you are.
once again reminding us that these two characters have grown very far apart. And we're reminded of that again in this scene when the two are fighting walkers, but they aren't moving in unison like before.
I had this.
And then we once again see Michonne don another bow staff type weapon. At first I thought this might be some type of weightlifting bar since they were in an exercise room, but the bar is really thin and threaded like a piece of rebar. And if you look closely, you can see that Michonne is actually pulling the bar out of a piece of cement rock that has fallen due to the building caving in. Now, when I see a piece of rebar stuck in a piece of rock, I think of this.
I've fallen, and I can't get up.
In Season 9, Episode 4, we saw Rick get bucked off his horse and fall onto this piece of rebar. In Episode 5, Rick's final episode, Rick is losing a lot of blood and goes in and out of a dream state, and he eventually finds himself at the bridge and is left with no choice but to blow it up. That piece of rebar changed Rick's fate and sent him down a very different path. So it'd be pretty poetic to see Michonne use a rebar staff to bring Rick back home. And there's some sword in the stone symbolism here as well. In the sword in the stone, when Arthur pulls the sword from the stone, it symbolizes divine purpose and a call to lead. The same could be true here with Michonne and her faith in divine intervention to find Rick and bring him home, and perhaps her destiny of bringing down the CRM. The building is collapsing around them, and this is meant to symbolize that Rick and Michonne's worlds are collapsing around them. Michonne's world is collapsing because she envisioned a perfect future where once she found Rick, she'd bring him home, but Rick's refusal has crushed that dream. Rick's world is crumbling as well. He has become content with his new life at the CRM. Rick created a safe space in his mind where he walled off his memories and connections to his past so that he could cope with his trauma, and Michonne's persistence is making those walls collapse around him. Once they get back to the apartment, the tension that's been building all season finally reaches desired temperature. So when this happened, my first thought was,
what? You coming?
but in all seriousness, what's happening here is the final wall Rick has put up is being broken down. The Rick Grimes we know and love that was taken away all those years ago has finally resurfaced. This intimacy with the love of his life has brought Rick back. Rick says,
"You're the love of my life."
And guys, let's remember, Rick was married before, but as we learned in seasons 1, 2, and 3, Rick and Lori's relationship was never that strong.
I don't think you're a bad mother.
Well, life is a different story.
And come the apocalypse and the love triangle with Shane, the two never truly reconciled their relationship. So, hearing Rick say that Michonne is the love of his life reminds us of how Rick and Michonne found the loves of their lives in the apocalypse, and how a bond like that, one formed in a broken world, can never really be unbroken. This line from Rick was a reference back to his father and their farm from when he was a child.
If I could change the CRM, there's a chance for future generations, a real chance. It may look like the end of the world, but it's only just the beginning.
And it mirrors how, in order for Rick to return to his true self, the walls he built had to be torn down. And then came the tearjerker, the lost memory that made Rick go down a path of forgetting where he came from, and forgetting how important his past life was to him. Hearing Rick say that he would visit Carl in his dreams and how one day he was just gone and he forgot his face was just so heartbreaking. We got a tease that Rick was forgetting Carl's face in the previous episode when Michonne met with the artist who drew her and Judith's faces on the phone screens.
There was a boy he asked me to draw, but I could never get it right for him.
In these mentions of Carl, we get flashbacks to when Carl was a little boy, prior to the end of the world. These same shots of Carl were used in his final episode, Season 8, Episode 9, and that actually isn't Chandler Riggs, the actor who played Carl. These were shot at the same time as Season 8, and another child actor was brought in to play young Carl. At this point in time, Carl's been dead for nearly 10 years, and Rick has gone nearly 8 years without seeing so much of a picture of his late son. So it makes sense that no matter how hard he tried, eventually his face would fade from Rick's memory. Carl was Rick's heart, and I'm so glad this series isn't ignoring the character and the impact that his death has had on Rick. And this speech that Rick gave about learning to be dead in order to live is yet another example of Rick's "We Are the Walking Dead" viewpoint. And yet again, it was Michonne who showed Rick that in order to live, you have to have something to live for. Michonne gave that reason back to Rick, not only through herself and her children, but by giving Rick the memory of Carl's face back. Michonne and Carl were very close, and she was able to tell the screen artist what he he looked like. And if you'll notice, this drawing features Carl with his eye patch. In the mid-season premiere of season 6, we saw Carl's eye taken by a bullet that was meant for Rick. Carl was that final piece of Rick's heart that Michonne needed to restore in order to bring Rick back from his grave, the grave that he had buried himself in years ago within his own mind. So in a way, Rick Grimes has risen from the dead. Rick and Michonne escape in this cool stick-shift hybrid.
They made a stick-shift electric car.
This bright yellow color of the car is meant to symbolize happiness, hope, and the sunshine of a new dawn, and how Rick has broken through the darkness that was holding him back, and now he's able to both physically and finally mentally return home. And this shot of the car driving away was similar to this iconic shot of Rick entering Atlanta back in the original series pilot. In that scene, Rick was looking for his family, and now we have Rick and Michonne together on their way home to find their family.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
So guys, those are all the Easter eggs that we found in this episode. Big shout out to Colton Ogburn who wrote this video. You can find his socials in the links below. But let us know what you thought of the episode down in the links or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Brianna.